Thank you for all coming today to our training session, which I'm sure you already are aware. The title for today is Fairy Bread. So it's part of our sequence of things to do with children's parties. So we've already covered a couple of other lots of food, and next week we'll do children's games, but today's session is on fairy bread. So what I'll do today is just roughly let you know the plan for today, and then we'll sort of get started. So our learning outcomes for today. So sorry, we had to improvise because it's not a proper training establishment. So our learning outcomes today, so what you will be able to do at the end of our session is firstly list the 3 ingredients used to make fairy bread, and then demonstrate how to make fairy bread. So firstly, does anyone here know what fairy bread is?
Yes, silence.
Oh, I know you're all shy, so that's okay. I'll just explain it to you.
Bread that fairies make.
Oh, close. It looks like fairies have made them. I think so, anyhow. So basically what it is you normally use soft white bread with butter, and you sprinkle hundreds and thousands over the top, and then cut them traditionally into triangles is what most people are familiar with, and stack it nicely onto a plate for a child's party. It's normally quite an exciting thing to look at because it's nice and bright for the children. So, so yes, firstly I'll demonstrate how to make it. So firstly we always have to make sure that we've got our clean hands. So we'll start with that. Also, there is not a lot of history about fairy bread, but what I did find out is that it was I suppose a bit of a treat during the war years when there wasn't anything much available for people to eat that was exciting, and in England people used to butter their bread and just put sugar on top. So it sort of evolved into something that is a little bit more exciting, I suppose, these days. So I'll just give you a demonstration on how to make fairy bread first. And shouldn't take too long. Good. That's sort of how we make fairy bread. You to your own desires, I suppose, as to how you actually stack it up. But that's basically what we're aiming for. So that's what we're learning to make today. So now I'll just do that a little slower for you.
Pass it around so you can have a look.
So firstly, before we do any sort of making of fairy bread, there are a few things that we need to make sure that we've got. Firstly, you need a stable table or tray to work on. You need to make sure that you've got bread and butter, obviously. Bread and butter knife is better for spreading the soft butter, and also you need a serrated knife for cutting it. Always remember to wash your hands before you even start doing anything, I suppose. You don't necessarily have to use Aquam, you could just wash them normally. And you need to make sure that your white bread is soft and it doesn't have any holes in it. You need to make sure that your butter is soft because otherwise it's too hard to spread. And obviously you need to make sure you've got some hundreds and thousands. I use a shaker because I find that it's better, but it's a matter of what everyone's preference is. So to slowly break it down into, I suppose, learning chunks that makes it easier to learn. We'll just start with our bread and butter on a clean surface. So the best idea is to make sure that you butter all the way to the edges. If you don't butter all the way to the edges, then you won't get the hundreds of thousands sort of sticking on. And if you put too much, doesn't really matter for the butter, but too few does, or not enough butter. And then just shake them on. It doesn't really matter how they end up, how you shake them, but you need to make sure that you've got a reasonable coverage, because if you put too many on, when you shift it they're all going to fall off. But if you have too few on, then you can see too much of the butter, and it's not quite as inviting for the children. So then just put your fingers on the corner of the bread to stabilise it, like so, and then using your bread knife cut diagonally across. Now that could be enough if you were having perhaps bigger children, but if you had smaller children you could cut them again like so, or if you had fussy eaters you could cut the edges off. So it's just a matter of who you're preparing for, the age of the children. And I mean, if you've got really big eaters you could always stack them up like that so that it's a sandwich style. If someone's particularly big eater, you could do that. Normally, traditionally, we would just have the little triangles like so and stack them up in a similar sort of fashion. Doesn't necessarily have to go like that, but that tends to be traditionally how it's made. So there is another alternative to making fairy bread in this fashion. We could use a cookie cutter and butter some bread, and then I'll show you that as well. Young children that wanted to help you, obviously you wouldn't like them dealing with knives and things like that, so if you had the opportunity you could butter some bread like so, cut it using a cookie cutter. It doesn't seem to go through in that way. If you flip it over and then just roll a rolling pin over the top, and then you can pop your little person out. This one we're using is a gingerbread man. So what you could do is prepare these earlier, as I have done, and then give them to children and they can participate active learning themselves by just popping it, inverting and tapping like so. Turn it back over. They've made their own gingerbread man. In that regard, children would feel like they're, I suppose, engaged and making something yummy without, the use of knives or anything like that. So there are no safety issues if you do something like that with your young child. If you want to transport your fairy bread, you certainly put it in this fashion here, and then you could put it stack it up into a takeaway container like so. If you were taking it to a party, you wouldn't get very many particularly in there, but you can take it in that fashion. Or if you had a whole plate, you could just cover it with Glad wrap or foil or something like that, and then that way you could easily transport things as well. We'll probably, girls, have a try. When you do, just before you do that, if you want to make it in advance, you can, but once you've made your fairy bread, then just leave it in ambient, like room temperature conditions. Don't put it in the fridge. You can do that for 2 to 4 hours safely before the child's parties. So, has anyone got any questions? No? Okay. Well, I think we probably have to share a few utensils, so if you just want to, if you wouldn't mind just doing that, I'll give you the Aqueum, and then just clean your, once you've got your hands cleaned, get you to all take a piece of bread and then have a go yourself and see how you go. That's a very good point actually. It's not a good idea to use crusts, because they're just a bit too difficult for buttering and all of that. So start when you like, just butter away, and there's a couple of bread and butter knives in the middle of the table there you can use to do that, or if you want some shapes, there's some different shapes. Okay. And we've got a star or a circle. So any questions you've got, let me know. Really nice. Really. Well done, fantastic. Funny. Said you're not quite finished. You need a pair of butterflies. Yeah, they do roll everywhere. So I've just got a couple of photos of what got here. We've got just your ordinary triangles of fairy bread. There's certainly a small person here looking like she's enjoying eating it, and here's a variation on the theme of a butterfly. Denise has made a butterfly. So you could put a musk stick in the middle. And then here's another excited child looking at how he's eating and enjoying his, or about to enjoy his fairy bread. And then just a different idea of how to stack it up with just a couple of the larger triangles on the plate. Wrapping up for today's session, our learning outcomes were to list the 3 ingredients used to make fairy bread. So can someone tell me the 3 ingredients? Yes?
Bread.
Yes.
Butter,
yes.
And hundreds and thousands.
Okay, terrific. And everyone's demonstrated that they know how to make fairy bread. So that's really all we need to do today. Thank you very much for coming along. And next week I'll see you all again when we'll be talking about children's parties. Is anyone's right? No more questions? No? Terrific. Thank you all again.